while doing the Atheism Libre 418, but he sort of didn't really feel that it was fully there. And after the Paris working, he goes to America, and he writes about this in his Confessions. He has a number of experiences where he considered these to be his de facto initiation into the Magus grade, which took a long time. But it happened in the events in his social life, with the people that he was interacting with, which he identified as various officers of that initiatory experience. And he uses the imagery that he got in the Golden Dawn, but it didn't happen in a temple with officers dressed as different animals. It happened while he was sort of partying in New York and like traveling around the southern U.S. and stuff like that, and working for different magazines, writing, so on and so forth. The manifestation of these things happened in his day-to-day life, and his explanation of that in the Confessions is really good to look at if you want to understand sort of how initiation takes place in the real world. And this was, so this was his motivation behind the Paris working, was to manifest that. But as you'll see if you read this in his Confessions, it's a very personal thing. It has to do with a lot of things, and he has to explain a lot that's going on in his life and who this person is and how they're significant, regardless of whether he would ever meet them again, and so on and so forth. That makes it hard to make it clear to people what the actual process of initiation is. So that's why he compares it to algebra. If you take a mathematical equation that uses particular numbers, you reveal something about the relations between those numbers as per the operations of that equation. If you take that same equation and you put it in algebraic form, you make it into an abstraction. And what you reveal, therefore, is not something about the relations between particular numbers, but something about the nature of the equation as a thing in itself. And that's what he's trying to do with the tarot here, is to reveal something about initiation as a thing in itself, as a process in itself, and in a way that people can take those abstract ideas that you see in the major arcana and in the smaller cards and in the court cards, and apply them to your own life, and use the particulars of your own life to fill in those sort of abstractions, and thereby making something about initiation clear, not just the particular initiation of a particular individual, because that kind of thing is going to be very different for different people, although it will contain, as he points out, the same elements if you look at them in the abstract form. So that's kind of what the Book of Thoth is, in a sense. It's his way of explaining initiation. So what we want to look at first is how is this deck different than other decks? What did Crowley change? What are the significant parts? The first thing, the thing that he makes the really big deal out of is the line from the Liber Al, the letters of my old book are right, but Zadi is not the star. So he had to find a new attribution for Zadi, and this took a long time, which he kind of kicks himself for later because it seems to be obvious. He talks about in the Book of Thoth how there was sort of, originally you see the zodiac as a circle, and the Golden Dawn essentially reversed the Justice card and the Strength card, which created a loop. And he saw if he adjusted the Emperor and the Star, he could create another equilibrating loop on the other side, so you essentially have a spiral instead of a circle, which to Crowley at the time was a revelation that Aiwass knew what he was talking about and was trying to make sense to him. Because it took him years to figure it out, it became more significant to him. Interestingly, there is a current of thought that claims that the figure in the original text is not Azadi, but something else, which would kind of fly in the face of a lot of what Crowley says. He was clearly committed to this. Personally, I tend to take Crowley at his word for those kind of things. Maybe not his personal stories, maybe not what he did in his life, or maybe not what people said about it, or what he says people said about him. But at least when he's talking about the occult, I tend to trust him. So that's just my take on it. But I would encourage people to explore that idea and come up with their own conclusions about it. Crowley writes a lot about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. If you want further details, definitely just look in the Book of Thoth, because he goes into great detail about it. There are a few other things he changed, similar minor changes. For example, he renamed the Justice card Adjustment, which is a sense of him trying to take sort of conventional morality out of the system. What he says is, justice is a subjective thing, a subjective concept. What one person will consider justice, another person might consider a crime. Whereas adjustment just refers to the universe sort of balancing. A push here happens, so a pull has to happen somewhere else. So that's more of an objective assessment, and what he considered to be more closely in line with sort of the forces of nature and the way that they work. he changed the strength card to the joy card, and instead of sort of a meek, pleasant woman with the lion, which you see in like the Rider-Waite deck, what he has is Babylon and the Beast. And Crowley says basically that he wanted it to be lust because lust implies a combination of strength and joy. And he wanted to bring that element of joy to it, an element of force and fire to it, and pull it away from sort of the idea, the meek will inherit the earth idea of overcoming through gentleness, which is definitely not part of Thelema in any way, shape, or form. Glorious strength, you would say, is what is sort of being represented there. And Crowley's other contribution to the interpretation of that card is that he connects it deeply with ceremonial magic, not just because it's been reestablished in the 11th position, which to him is the number of magic, but for him, when this card comes up, this means that it's time to really call on occult forces to accomplish the thing that you're looking for, and you really don't see that interpretation in earlier versions of the deck. Of the changes that he made, the most significant changes to me are the changes that he made to the Lovers card and the Ark card. The Lovers in Liber 418 is a great detail has gone into the explanation of this, where the angels say, you shouldn't call this Lovers, you should call it the Brothers, and it makes a direct reference to Cain and Abel. And this flip around is interesting. Because it changes the whole idea of that card in that position. Although Crowley still calls it the Lovers, and in the Harris version of the card, it depicts a holy marriage. But you do still see Cain with the hammer of Thor after having killed Abel. He's still there in the card. The reference is there, but he didn't officially change the title. I'm really not sure why he did that. I think it would be more appropriate to leave it like that, but for whatever reason he made that choice. But this is where things get really intense in Liber 418, and he says, okay, here's how we interpret the Cain and Abel myth. We understand that Abel is the child of Adam and Eve, but Cain is the child of Eve and the serpent, and he is the initiation force, where the adepts are considered to be the children of Cain, and marked in the same way. It says quite bluntly in Liber 418, the mark of Cain is the same as the mark of the beast. If we look at what those two marks mean, after God sees that Cain has killed Abel, he puts a mark on him to curse him, because Cain was originally a farmer, and this was kind of the big significant thing where Abel worked with animals and he sacrificed an animal to God. Cain worked with plants, with vegetables, and he made a vegetable sacrifice to God, and God was not pleased with that sacrifice. He wanted real blood. So that's what pissed Cain off, and then he kills Abel, and that becomes the sacrifice which puts the mark on him. And it says in Liber 418, God didn't hear the children of Eve until blood was shed. So this curse that God puts on Cain is kind of interesting. If you take it back to Adam and Eve, Adam gets cursed because he eats the apple to be cast out of the garden and to work the earth, which is what Cain was doing. And when God puts his curse on Cain, the earth will no longer give up anything to him. In a sense, it's a relief from the curse, the original curse that God puts on Adam and Eve. And it also means that he can't be killed. It's the whole point of putting the mark on him, because Cain says, if you put me out there, I'm going to die, someone's going to kill me. And God's like, no, I won't let them, basically. Which is weird, because he calls it a curse, but it's almost like a protection. And that's when and it's also significant to the system that Enoch was the first child of Cain and his wife. And it goes into a little bit of the generations of Cain, which is where you get the first idea in the Bible that, okay, Adam and Eve and their kids aren't the only people in the world. Even though they've been cast out into the world, there's obviously other people, because Cain's cast out and he goes and reproduces with them. But the fact that it's equated with the mark of the beast is interesting, because in the book of Revelations, what it says about the mark of the beast is, no man can buy or sell without this mark on them. So what's the connection? You have this mark that means that we're told in Liber 14, this is the symbol of initiation. This is what, when you are initiated into the brotherhood, when you go into the AA, this is the mark that it puts on you, essentially. So to equate the ability to buy or sell with the protection of God from wicked men, and the inability to work the earth in that sense, in the sense of the original